Well, hello, and welcome back to Read Becca. It is time once again for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general chit-chat and catch-up on my week. And this is going to be a tough one because last week was a very short catch-up, and this week I feel like I have things to say about everything, so it might be a long one, but also I'm worried I'm going to run out of memory card space if I go too long. So we're going to try to make it not too long. However, so many things to say. And we're going to start with the most difficult to talk about, and that is The Telling by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is the final of the Hainish novels, which are all kind of standalones in the same universe. And this is a weird one because it was written quite a bit later, and it's also the most Earth-focused. Earth is a big part of this novel. It's also the most traditionally dystopian of the Hainish novels. So we're with a character, Sadi Das, who seems to be Indo-Canadian, and we start with her as a child on Earth, and she's living there under this extremely oppressive, controlling, fascist religious government, the Unists. They have taken over the world, basically. And she sees an ecumenical envoy and kind of goes, I want to do that. The Ecumen are a far space-flung coalition of humans or humanoids that have envoys that go as ambassadors all over space. And they're very sort of forward thinking and trying to advance everyone. So she does that. She goes to school and trains really hard, and we jump forward to beyond that, where she actually is this envoy on a planet called Akka. And Akka is very Earth-like, so much so that the Unist religion sent missionaries at some point to Akka. And in that intervening time while she was in school. And while they did not convert the Akkans, it's clear that their influence had a fundamental alteration effect on the society there. And the reason they don't know why that effect happened or how is that it resulted in them completely erasing all of their written history and the previous language of the planet. And they also keep very, very tight control on how many people from off-world can be on the planet of Akka. Only 4 can be on planet at any time. So 2 of them are from Ecumen, and that is Sadi and her sort of advisor, supervisor, and they're there on the planet with the Akkans. But what has happened is that now there is this fascist corporate state that has taken over Akka, and that is very controlling, very dominating. Everything is about work and about serving as producer consumers to the corporation. And so that sounds very familiar, right? So that's a traditional dystopian. They've erased the writing and history of this world, and it's extremely strictly forbidden. They're under a lot of control where Sadi can go. But because this is a space novel, right, we don't spend any time actively in space, but we know that her travel to this planet had that usual long space travel timey-wimey quality where decades actually passed from her leaving to arriving on the planet. So she left before this transformation happened. So she has studied and learned this old language and the writing that now is illegal. And she's shown up and feels like a complete failure, basically. And so that's the beginning of the novel, is her feeling like this just total failure because she can't actually carry out what she's set to carry out. She can't really study the history of this world or collect any of its art or literature because it's all gone. And she's being controlled and kept to the city, but her supervisor gets clearance for her to leave the city and travel outside to kind of more rural areas. And so that's where the story really takes off, is her going on this multi-day boat journey down the river, kind of a long river cruise as it increasingly gets more and more rural. There are goats coming on the boat, and it just is so lively. And when she arrives in the sort of rural area of Ozcat, she begins to see that maybe not everything is gone. In these rural areas, people are maintaining some of these old ways. The telling is the old way, really. And the telling goes beyond just oral storytelling and the telling of history. It's an ideology, a philosophy, a religion, all bound up in one. It also includes so many things about how they live their lives. And it's almost this steel sharpens steel kind of idea where they are supposed to be ever increasing knowledge, ever challenging themselves, constantly critical thinking, and bouncing ideas off of one another. And so this is such a powerful book for those things, the philosophical discussions that this covers. The book at the middle has this incredible parable that she doesn't totally understand, and this is someone telling a parable to her, and she doesn't totally understand it, and so she's contemplating through what could the cultural context of this indicate this is trying to say, and trying to understand that. But then the book closes with her finally coming to grasp the meaning of that parable. And it's just such a powerful encapsulation of the novel, the way that Le Guin wraps that up. And I found that so amazing. This is by far, I think, the most anthropological and linguistic of Le Guin's novels in the Hainish cycle, or of her novels that I've read overall. And I felt like that appealed to me so strongly. I also think that this is just really strong as a novel. A lot of her books are very, very slowly paced, and this is slowly paced, but it feels like it has a cohesive arc where, like Left Hand of Darkness, you kind of get two separate stories almost. Same with the Dispossessed. This one feels the most cohesive of the Hainish novels, and the most meaningful in line with that cohesion. So I'm in a weird place about this one because I turned to it because it was a reread that I've been thinking about for years, and I had wanted to reread it and increasingly felt it on my mind because I had gone through pretty recently a full read through of the Hainish novels and then just sort of stopped before getting back to this one at the end, and I wanted to cap off that project. And so I kind of turned to it because of that, but in having it on my mind so long, I kept having the idea bubbling up that maybe this is actually my favorite of the Hainish novels. And now having reread it, I think that's right. I think that is. I think this is probably the best of the Hainish novels in terms of it being a complete thing, in terms of the delivery and her having matured as a writer as well. Yeah, it really surprised me, that aspect, because it was memorable before, but there's just so much there that I pulled out of it. And I think in part maybe circumstances currently in the world really were hitting on me for this one. And so for the moment, I always have a leaning toward Left Hand of Darkness because it has so much personal, emotional weight to me. But I think this is actually the best and my favorite, in my estimation, of the Hainish novels now. So I'm very conflicted now because I've always had like the Left Hand of Darkness as like the top echelon of my favorite books, and I think this one is now going up there. Yeah, so I just love this. I loved all the conversations about this. I think the characters were really powerful. I think there was so much quiet introspection to this novel, but it's also full of really great nature writing. Much like Left Hand of Darkness, this does have a really nice long journey beyond the river journey. There's another nice long journey, and like just such powerful scenes in this book. I felt so many things that are pretty timeless to this. I can see real world connections, but at the same time, it feels distanced enough that it can be applicable throughout lots of different scenarios. So I don't know if I said everything I want to say about this one, but I don't want to be talking about it all day. This was fantastic. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal book. Then, another one I have a ton to say about, but I'm going to try to limit myself, is A Trade of Blood by Robert Jackson Bennett, the third Anna and Din, or Shadows of Leviathan series novel. This is a great mystery fantasy series with a strong science and botanical bent to it. We have Anna and Din as a Sherlockian duo. Anna has heightened senses, and she's very off the wall and all over the place and is very like Sherlock. She can solve any crime. And Din is her helper. He's an engraver who can record memories of everything that he has seen through sort of augments that he has been given, plant-based augments. Everything magical and scientific here is sort of plant-based. So the two of them as this duo have been called to a more remote area that is familiar to Din, similar to where he grew up. And so that's sort of new. He's been in far-flung places that were very different from where he lived before. And so this is someplace that he knows the lay of the land a bit. But they are there because of a Romeo and Juliet sort of scenario. A pair of warring families, one who it has a monopoly on the agriculture of the area, and the other who has the monopoly on the meat production of the area. They are full of hate for each other because of this monopoly, more or less. And as a result, the young couple that we encounter, a man from one family and a woman from the other. The woman has been killed. The man has been captured and imprisoned, but he's under threat because the enemy faction really want him out, want him killed, strung up for the murder of this girl. So Anna and Din are there to figure out what really happened. And of course, it's not going to be just as simple as a murder. So it feels like I suspected everyone in this novel. I think I was buddy reading this with Tiffany from A Towering TBR, and we had a great buddy read. But I think I threw out just every single person we encountered as a potential suspect as we went along, because Robert Jackson Bennett is so good at writing a compelling mystery where you do sort of suspect everyone. You have justified reasons to suspect everyone. And so it isn't clear as you go along where you're going to end up. And that was great. I'm struggling with what I want to actually cover about the plot of this book, because each of the books stands alone, and there is so much more world building as you go along in every single book. So I think generally I want to talk more about themes. The main themes of this book really are talking about the monopoly aspect, the ways that these two effectively companies have so much power over the entire landscape that they're existing within to exploit both people and the environment in the area. We also have a really, really strong analog to factory farming. Like, it literally is just factory farming, and there's cows and everything. That was very, very difficult, and that's the most direct messaging. But monopoly and like antitrust and that kind of thing is really strong to this book as well. The factory farming element, I will say, was less gruesome than I thought. There's one scene in the book that you are like actively present in the place where like the slaughterhouse is happening. But for the rest of it, the themes of that and like the ideas of that are very, very present throughout the book. So even though that wasn't an overly gory element, the act of slaughtering, there is, I think, the most gore in this book overall, for that reason and for many other reasons across this book. So very, very much more graphic, I think, than previous entries, though they have all been kind of horror adjacent or with some horror and violence and gore tropes. I think this one was the most gory. And I do think we also verged into some cosmic horror pretty significantly in this book, where previously we had the Leviathans are pretty akin to old gods in the deep, that type of thing of cosmic horror. Here we actually ran into some overt, like you can't look at something because your brain won't be able to understand it, and that's like overt cosmic horror stuff. So that increased. And we're coming to understand so much more about the world. Apologies, cat quake. Sorry. So we're coming to understand so much more about the world and how things work that I can tell is building to something more as an arc of this whole story. One of the most interesting things about, I think, this series for me is how Din has been really built up as kind of a country bumpkin who doesn't really know very much about the world. And that is such a vehicle, and you can see it in the first two books, but in this book especially, it comes across that he's been built as that in order to deliver his slow growing understanding that maybe the system and the empire as a whole are not kind of the good or reliable thing that he has always thought. And Anna is so much more like world weary and cynical about things overall. But there's a moment in this one, and I think it has been built to over the series. Like, we start from him at a place of just thinking of the Empire is what has the walls built and keeps the Leviathans at bay. And that's a very simplistic understanding. And over the course of this, he's slowly seen the complexities of things in the way that the Empire interacts with the rest of the world in these areas that he has never really experienced. And so here he's in an area he has experienced, he's familiar with, and is uncovering new layers to it now with his new understanding of the world that help him understand that toward the end, this is a philosophical thing that doesn't really spoil anything to do with the plot here, but Anna kind of comments like, yeah, the one thing the Empire is good at is kind of just continuing. Even if it's no good for anyone, it just keeps continuing anyway. And that's such a, like, she mentions that's such a cynical way of looking at things, but it is the way it is, and she feels like it always has been. And Din is beginning to sort of see that in a jaded way. that he didn't before. And so I love him as that vehicle for the journey of understanding systemic injustice, maybe. And I think that's where we're going. But this particular book, man, I thought this was so compelling. This was another 5-star read for me in this series. I think this is very quickly ramping up to be a favorite series of mine because I love the messaging. I think the factory farming thing was a little like obvious and overt and in your face, but it was really interesting in the way he delivered it and all of the elements that he put together behind that. And just the world building that we're getting is so fascinating. So I can't remember. I think I heard someone say he had a contract for 9 books total now in this series, but I have not done anything to actually check that. I'm pretty much at the point where like he could just keep printing money by putting out these books. I love them, and I will absolutely be pre-ordering any book that comes out in the series upcoming because it was so good. Yeah. And then another one I have a lot to say about, but I'm going to try to keep it short, which I have failed at this entire video. So Emi Yagi's When the Museum is Closed, translated from Japanese by Yuki Tejima. Hi. This is sort of a contemporary, surreal-ish Japanese novel about Rika, who speaks Latin and doesn't have very many ambitions. But one day, one of her old Latin professor contacts her for this part-time job on Mondays when the museum is closed to come in and speak with the statue of Venus. And that's a very odd, quirky conceit, and this is an odd, quirky book. And there's not a lot to it. It's very light. It's it's a thought-provoking book, but without a lot of heaviness, and I really like that. That was right for the moment. I think that there were multiple different sort of plot lines here. So Rika is an interesting character because she has no ambition, and I could see a lot of critique, societal critique in that. She just kind of keeps moving forward with her life. And then she gets this job and she does kind of find a lot of value in it and enjoys it. But we jump backward to her growing up and why she speaks Latin so well. And it connects back to sort of the one person she had her guard down with in life. But in line with that, we learn about her upbringing or her growing up as she developed an invisible raincoat around her. And that's very strange and sort of fabulous. It's clearly an analog for, or a stand-in for, anxiety and her keeping people at a distance away from her. But it's a very literalization of that. And I found that really fascinating. And as she gets to know Venus as well, she seems to let her guard down. And Venus encourages her to do and try new things, not directly, but she feels like she's opening up more and more. She also has this weird job where she works in a freezer warehouse, like a frozen food warehouse. And so she has this advantage because of the guard that she has up. The raincoat keeps her warmer than everyone else, more or less. Like it's very strange and surreal in that. And I don't think I got everything out of that I possibly could have. But in the winding down of this novel, there are some things more about Venus and about how she had this incredible life when she was initially created, where she was sitting in the houses of nobles and wealthy people, and she was there for parties, and she got to see all of that. And then she got moved into museums, and people more observe her and place their own ideas of what she is on her and never bother to get to know her. And there's some real connections I see, or real similarities I see, with Madeline Miller's novelette Galatea, which I loved. Very short, very impactful. And that one is real heavy. This one is really light and quirky in how it's going about that. But it has something similar there, where Galatea is the sculptor who the sculptor wishes could come alive, and then is not really happy about that aspect because he wanted her to be something that he put all his expectations in, and he doesn't want her to have her own identity that she actually does once she's alive. And that's kind of what goes on here, where she has no agency on her own. Venus doesn't. And Rika's increasingly recognizing and empathizing with that. And I think also seeing that in herself, in that she's not making choices about herself. She's just sort of moving forward. And so I enjoyed this a lot. I don't think it was as strong as Diary of a Void, but also it was interesting timing to have picked this up because Tokyo Chemist just did a video covering the Akutagawa Prize, which is like the primary Japanese language fiction prize, non-translated. And Yagi's newest book in Japanese language, called Anti-Good Morning, which sounds like it's about workplace toxic positivity, is up for the prize. And man, does that sound like a winner. That sounds like one I really want to read. So this just whet my appetite for wanting to get to that whenever it is translated to English. It I don't think has a date yet, but Anti-Good Morning sounds like it's going to be a good next book for Yagi. So this was definitely kept up at a very high bar, but not quite as good as her previous. Oh, also, this is for Women in Translation Month, so that has been going very well. I'm having a lot of success with knocking out everything I put on my TBR for WITmonth. Then, the last thing that I read was from the depths of Hoopla. I did a lot of browsing this week because I was not feeling well. And so I got deep into the Hoopla catalog and discovered the Herc Tom series by William Mangieri. And there are, I think, 16 books in this series, where they're really short stories and on audio. They were about 30 to 40 minutes each. So I listened to the first two, and it was perfect for garbaugust. That was kind of what I was hoping for, and it was great. It was really entertaining. So I listened to the first two, which are Purr Mission and Nipped in the Butt. And they are very much individual space adventures. So each 30 to 40 minute is a story that is properly opened and closed. And they also have strong elements of military sci-fi tropes, but without the doodliness, I think, that you get a lot in military sci-fi. Or they do. They have a strong sense of masculinity, but I think it's really like positive masculinity, because he is such a father and family guy character, family cat character, family Tom character, who really cares about his pride, as in like the pride of cats. And the author even specifically mentions wanting to make him a real family man at the end of the second. So that was interesting to go into, knowing some military tropes that I don't get along with. This really did them well, I think. So the first, in Purr Mission, his cub has come down with a virus, a strange virus, and he has to go get an antidote that he is being told by the bureaucracy that he can't go get because it's experimental, more or less. And so he goes on this crazy shenanigans to get the antidote, of course. That's pretty much the plot of the first one. The second one is very interesting because he discovers a synthetic strain of catnip that his son is keeping hidden. His teenager has snuck into the house, and oh no, it's this dangerous synthetic strain of catnip. And so he's off trying to figure out what's going on with that, and where did that come from, and all of that. And yeah, it's very, very silly. So this was silly and fun, and it doesn't take itself over seriously. So it's very self-aware of the humorous element and plays into that, leans into the fun, and I like when that happens. I love that this is so full of puns out the wazoo, and it just is really goofy and fun, having a good time with itself. The characters are cats, but they're not humans in catsuit sort of deal. They really are bipedal cats with the physiology and biology of cats, and I like that a lot. So this was a good time, and it was kind of what I needed. So I will be intending to continue on with this series with my Hoopla borrows. I will see how many I can get through because those are very limited. I think there was a bind up, but I haven't gone through and looked overly seriously to see. So it was a good time. So that is what I read. What I'm reading now, I've got Terminal Boredom by Izumi Suzuki, again for WITmonth, and I'm listening to Ancillary Mercy, the final of the Imperial Ratch trilogy. As far as what I watched Dr. Odyssey. This is a Ryan Murphy show that I probably only watched because of that, but I was reminded of it because of all the cruise ship hantavirus stuff, and I had heard this was kind of cheesy soap opera, and it is that. It's very soap opera-y. I think they're going for maybe a Baywatch vibe. It's really like that mix of half of it is pure soap opera and the other half of it is like really dramatic rescue scenarios on a cruise ship. But it feels like they had the budget to go all out on this, and Ryan Murphy really likes to go over the top, and a lot of great cameos. So the cast, Don Johnson is the captain of the ship, and he is great in the role. I'm not a huge fan of his, but I think he was perfect for that role. Joshua Jackson, not Josh Johnson. Joshua Jackson of Dawson's Creek fame is the new incoming lead doctor on the ship. And then we're also with his two sort of physician assistants. And the three of them are really interesting in dynamic, and Joshua Jackson is great, and he's very pulpy and does perfect with this show. So I liked the relationship dynamics with them, but what is really cool about the show and fun, I think, that makes it have this very popcorn quality is that each week of each episode is a different themed cruise. And so you get a completely different theme every single episode. And that's great. And it also means they get to bring on new guests as passengers. So the cameo cast is huge. I think like the best cameo cast was on the cruise that was for wellness influencers. And we had Kate Berlant, Amy Sedaris, and Margaret Cho as sort of competing frenemy wellness influencers. Like, they were so good. John Stamos shows up as the captain's brother in one episode. One of the great things about Ryan Murphy, so Ryan Murphy did Glee, he did The Politician, one of my favorite shows, and he has done American Horror Story as well, and that's like a very different vibe. But one of the things he does really well as someone who is a showrunner, like, he really finds the humanity in conflicting sides to things. And one of the most powerful episodes toward the end of the series is the cruise line has double booked, basically. They've booked 2 competing women's book tours on this ship, thinking, oh yeah, they're all women, they'll all not mind being together. However, one is a trad wife and the other is a sex positive influencer. And it's so interesting how we start off with the base sort of prejudicial impressions of them, just baselines, but then dig deeper and show complexities and find that human story for both sides and look at them as complex human beings who have their reasons for the way they are. Really interesting one. But it's also an over-the-top, just ridiculous series as a whole. And it plays into that, much like the books I was talking about. It's silly and it knows what it is. It leans into that and is self-aware of how ridiculous it is. Like there's at one point where like we're in an episode that like death is imminent and like they're amputating multiple limbs, and then cut to the next episode and woo, casino week. It's like, this is so ridiculous. So nobody has any like ingrained trauma really other than this. Their backstories, like nobody's really falling apart from what's going on, even though they're near death every week. Basically, it's crazy. The ship medical facilities also are really ridiculous. They have equipment that I think hospitals don't even have. Like, it's almost a futuristic thing, I think, in what they have access to do. So yeah, silly and fun and soapy. Then completely to the opposite end, I watched Robot Dreams, a silent film that's animated that I heard about from Ali over at Genteel Black Hole, and I really enjoyed this. So it's silent in that there's no talking, but much like old silent films, there is a lot of sound effects, a lot of music, and that's really integral to the storytelling. So this features a dog who is very lonely, and he purchases a robot to be his friend. He sees an ad for a robot and calls and gets this robot and puts it together, and then they have this friendship. And that's pretty much all I would say about the plot, but a lot of what the story hinges on I found very interesting in terms of the introspection you can do about it and the ways you can look at it, or you can purely see it as a fun, entertaining movie if you don't want to look deeper. I think that it hinges so much, though, on Doug sort of being a little silly and careless with Robot. And I think the movie is meaning to commentate on interpersonal relationships and the way we kind of don't listen or don't get to know our partner, don't get informed about their needs. I think based on how the story plays out, that's an element. But I, being myself, I just couldn't get over like connecting it with pets and the way people get pets without doing any research, and just assume they can keep them alive and like assume that just walking into a pet store and buying whatever food is fine and that kind of stuff. Like not getting to know or understand what's ideal for your pet. And so I don't think it was meant to be taken that deeply or to go that way, but like I just kept seeing that in Dog's carelessness about Robot in these things that I think are meant to be like really funny, that he's just being careless and screwing up. And I was like, no, you need to go read the manual. Like read the manual for your robot, please. So yeah, I was frustrated. People should research their dogs. Please do that. Research your pets. Anyway, so I enjoyed it very much though. I think it was like impeccably made, really fantastically made film. So I'm glad. I don't think I ever would have heard about it if Ellie had not mentioned it, because it's sort of a niche thing, but I did find it on Hulu in the US, so it's available to stream there. And I think the creator is like French, so it would have been like a French language film if there were any words, but it is set in New York City, and all the people are animals. So yeah. Anyway, I think that's all for our books and our watching stuff. For life, I have nothing to say other than, as I already mentioned, health was not great this week. Last week, I had mentioned how rough things were going, and it unfortunately was much, much worse before it got better, but I can confidently say today, I think I'm pretty much solid, back to normal today. So feeling immensely better today after a really, really rough couple of weeks. I think that's all for me for now. So let's jump to my recommendations for the week. I do have a couple that I came up with. The first is from Joanna at Me, My Dog, and Dogs and Books. Great channel that does very long vlogs. I love her sense of style. Like, it's very maximalist, like loud colors and patterns. Yeah. And she does these wonderful long vlogs, but a lot of what she does involves going thrifting. And she's been trying to cut back on that. So she did a video on books and budgeting, and I found it really enlightening, even though this is not really a problem that I personally have. I think the way she thought through her personal process was fascinating. So highly recommend that. And then the other one was from Penny, the paperback cat, who did a video about process of finishing series and tackling your TBR of open-ended series and what you haven't completed, and just the different approaches you could take to doing that, which I appreciate basically all boil down to, or she boiled down a lot to, well, if you don't actually care that you have a bajillion series open, then don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. So yeah, it was a very casual and I think approachable way of looking at your series that you have ongoing. So very much enjoyed that. So those are my recommendations for the week. And with that, I think this is going to be a very lengthy video to edit, unfortunately for me. But hopefully you will be seeing a somewhat edited version of this. It is not an hour long. So I will let you go with a message that I hope that your week in reading and in life are wonderful. And thank you so much for watching.